Snow began to fall earlier than anyone expected that night, drifting softly at first over the mountain pass before turning into a restless white fury. The wind roared through the pines like an angry spirit, rattling branches and throwing sheets of snow sideways across the narrow road. Most travelers had wisely stayed home, but life has a strange way of placing the right people in the wrong place at the right time. 15 bikers, all members of a group known as the Iron Wolves, were caught in that unexpected storm. They had left the nearest town an hour earlier, confident they could reach the next rest stop before the snowfall worsened. But the storm rolled in faster than they could ride, and as visibility dropped to only a few feet, even their powerful engines could no longer cut through the blinding white wall ahead of them. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man nicknamed Bear, lifted his hand in the air and signaled everyone to stop. The group pulled over beside a lonely stretch of road bordered by forest on one side, and a row of frosted wooden fences on the other. Snow piled quickly around their boots as soon as they dismounted. "This is bad," muttered Tank, the tallest of them, shaking ice off his beard, roads disappearing. "No point trying to ride in this," Bear said. "We need shelter, and fast." But shelter was difficult to find in the middle of nowhere. The bikers scanned the landscape, squinting against the wind. There were no hotels, no rest houses, not even a gas station. Just darkness, snow, and distant pine silhouettes. Then, faintly, a light flickered through the trees. "Over there," shouted Ringo. They trudged through the deepening snow, pushing their motorcycles slowly along the road until they reached a small gravel driveway partially buried under ice. At the end of the driveway stood an old, cozy farmhouse with warm yellow light spilling from the windows. Smoke curled gently from the chimney, a promise of heat in a freezing world. Bear hesitated. "It's late. Folks don't usually open their door to 15 leather-clad bikers at night." "We're gonna freeze out here," Tank argued. "We'll explain ourselves." They walked up to the porch, snow crunching loudly beneath their heavy boots. Bear stepped forward and knocked. The door opened a few seconds later, revealing a tiny elderly woman with silver hair tied in a bun. She wore a knitted shawl over her shoulders, her eyes bright and kind but slightly startled at the sight of the massive men standing on her porch. "Well now," she said gently, "you boys look cold." Bear took a breath. "Ma'am, we're real sorry to bother you, but the storm hit harder than expected. We got nowhere to go. Would it be all right if we waited inside until the worst passes? We won't cause trouble." The old lady blinked once, then smiled warmly. "Of course, dear, come in all of you, just wipe your boots. I just mopped the floor this morning." The bikers stared at her, stunned. They had prepared for questions, suspicion, maybe even a shout to get off the property. But kindness, that threw them off. "Ma'am, are you sure?" Bear asked cautiously. Yes, come in before you turn into icicles." She stepped aside, and the bikers hurriedly removed snow from their coats and boots before entering one by one. Inside, the farmhouse glowed with warmth from a crackling fireplace. The air smelled of cinnamon, stew, and baked bread. Handmade quilts lay folded on the couch, and shelves filled with books and trinkets covered the walls. "It's small," the old lady said, "but it's warm. My name is Margaret, though you boys can call me Maggie." The men introduced themselves awkwardly, each far larger and rougher looking than their gracious host. "You must be hungry," Maggie said. "Storm like this always makes people hungry." "Oh no, ma'am, we couldn't," Bear began, but she lifted a hand sharply. "Nonsense, sit." The Iron Wolves obeyed immediately, like schoolchildren told to take their seats. Maggie shuffled to the kitchen and began ladling steaming stew into bowls. The men exchanged looks of disbelief and gratitude. Tank leaned close to Bear. "She ain't scared of us at all." Bear smiled. Strangely comforting, Maggie brought out pot after pot, far more food than 15 men should logically expect an elderly woman to have prepared, but she insisted she always cooked extra, just in case someone needed it. Her eyes sparkled each time one of the bikers asked for seconds. As the storm raged outside, thunder rolling through the night, Maggie brought out blankets, pillows, and more quilts. The bikers set up makeshift sleeping spots on the floor, couches, and even in the hallway. "You remind me of my sons," she said softly as she placed a blanket over Ringo, who had already dozed off. "I lost them years ago. All grown men, strong and loud, just like you boys." Bear's heart tightened. "We're sorry for your loss." She smiled faintly. "Life takes, life gives. Tonight it gave me company." Bear looked around at his brothers settled warmly in her living room. You gave us much more. The storm continued howling through the night, but inside Maggie's farmhouse, laughter returned to rooms that had been silent for years. The bikers told stories, clean ones, as Maggie jokingly insisted, and she shared tales of her late husband, her garden, and her love for card games. She even taught them a few. By midnight, she had 15 bikers sitting in a circle on her rug learning how to play a card game she called Sleepy Fox. She had to repeatedly scold Tank for trying to peek at her hand. Cheaters never win, young man, she said sternly. Yes, ma'am, Tank replied with a grin. Eventually the storm eased, and one by one the bikers drifted to sleep. Maggie, however, stayed awake a bit longer, adjusting blankets over them as though they were her own grandchildren. Morning arrived with gentle sunlight and clear skies. Birds chirped outside the frosted windows. Maggie brewed coffee and hummed softly as she prepared breakfast. But when she glanced outside, the mug in her hand nearly slipped. Her driveway, and the road beside it, was lined with motorcycles, not 15, nearly 100, rows upon rows extending far beyond the house, gleaming in the morning light like metal soldiers awaiting orders. Maggie blinked hard. Oh my heavens! Bear walked in from the living room yawning. Mornin', Maggie, need help with? He froze at the sight. The iron wolves were loyal, protective, and dangerously fast with communication. When word spread through their biker network that Maggie the Angel had taken in 15 freezing wolves at midnight, every rider within a 100-mile radius decided they were coming to thank her. One of the newcomers, a massive biker with a white beard and tattoos up to his neck, stepped forward. Ma'am, he said reverently, we heard what you did. Nobody helps our brothers like that. We came to show respect. Another biker added, need anything fixed? Roof, fence, that shaky porch step. We're good with our hands. A third one held up a toolbox. We brought supplies. Maggie pressed a hand over her heart. Good heavens, I didn't expect all this. Bear stepped beside her. We didn't call them, they just came. By 9 a.m., the quiet farmhouse had transformed into a bustling community project. Some bikers repaired her fence, others cleaned her yard, fixed her gutters, and chopped weeks' worth of firewood. A group rebuilt her sagging barn door. Someone even repainted her porch steps without being asked. Maggie wandered among them in a daze, offering cookies, muffins, and the occasional hug. The wolves responded as though those small gestures were treasures. Inside the barn, 2 bikers were installing new lighting. Outside, a team was digging a new garden bed. Others polished her windows, mended her roof shingles, and reinforced the old chicken coop, even though Maggie no longer kept chickens. Just in case you ever want to, one biker explained shyly. Bear approached Maggie with a gentle expression. We want to give back, ma'am. You gave us warmth and shelter without knowing who we were. That means something. But boys, she said softly, turning to look at the countless motorcycles, this is too much. No, ma'am, said Tank, handing her a mug of tea he'd made. This is exactly the right amount. As the day unfolded, Maggie floated among them like the heart of a hive, touched beyond words. Her home hadn't known this much laughter, noise, or life in decades. By noon, the kitchen smelled of stew again, but this time prepared by Bear and 3 others who insisted Maggie sit and rest. You cooked for us, Bear said. Now it's our turn. Maggie reluctantly allowed it, giggling when she caught Tank wearing an apron with cartoon ducks on it. The bikers ate together on picnic benches they had built in her yard. Maggie sat at the center, and they treated her with more care than royalty. After lunch, one of the elder bikers approached her slowly. Ma'am, he said, holding a small wooden box. I carved this years ago. Been carried in it in my saddlebag, waiting for the right person to give it to. The box was hand-carved with wolves running beneath a moon. Inside lay a silver bracelet with tiny paw engraving. For a moment, Maggie couldn't speak. Tears welled in her eyes. I can't take this, she whispered. It's not for you to take. The man said, it's for us to give. The afternoon was filled with repairs, jokes, music, and gratitude. Some bikers played guitar on the porch. Others taught Maggie how to rev a motorcycle. She laughed like a girl again. By evening, the wolves gathered at the front yard. Bear stood beside Maggie as the men formed a semicircle around her. We have something to say, Bear announced. You took us in without fear, without hesitation, and without condition. That kind of kindness is rare. He placed a leather jacket over Maggie's shoulders, custom, made deep black with a wolf embroidered on the back and the words Honorary Iron Wolf Mama Maggie. She gasped softly, fingertips trembling as they touched the jacket. Your family now, Bear said. The wolves let out a unified cheer that shook the trees. Maggie's voice cracked as she whispered, I don't know what to say. You said plenty last night. Tank grinned. Mostly telling me to stop cheating. The bikers erupted in laughter. One by one, they hugged her before mounting their bikes. Engines roared to life in a thunderous chorus. Maggie stood in her driveway, wrapped in her new jacket, watching the living sea of riders preparing to depart. Bear was the last to mount. We'll check on you, he promised. Often. You boys come anytime, Maggie said, wiping her eyes. Doors always open. Bear nodded once, then raised 2 fingers in a biker salute. The others followed, hundreds of hands lifting in respect. Engines thundered, tires rolled, and slowly the wolves rode away in long, majestic lines down the country road, their silhouettes fading into the sunset. Maggie stood there long after they disappeared, her heart fuller than it had ever been. That night, her farmhouse was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel lonely, because she now knew. Somewhere out there on the roads, hundreds of men carried a little piece of her kindness with them, and they would always return. Once a year, without fail, the Iron Wolves rode back to Maggie's home. Not 15, not 100, but every single one who could make the journey. They brought food, flowers, blankets, and repairs. They filled her yard with laughter and songs. They told her stories of the road, and she told them stories of her garden. They called her Mama Maggie, and she called them my boys. And in the years that followed, whenever a snowstorm hit that lonely mountain road, riders would always look toward the warm light shining in Maggie's window, knowing that no matter how harsh the storm, there would always be a place where kindness lived, waiting with a warm fire and a gentle smile.